Good thinking. Would be helpful to record this session. As always, we're on Zoom. It's one big happy Zoom meeting here. We really appreciate everybody who joins and observes our work today. Thanks for being here with us. As our usual protocol is, we try to have council members, if you're in a place where you can do it, have your camera on so we can see each other. And if you are joining us as a member of the public or subcommittee members, we ask you to keep your camera off until there's some public comment period, and the same for the use of the chat. So thanks everybody for helping to do this in our Zoom environment. With that, let me turn it over to your chair, Kristen Clouser. Kristen, why don't you kick us off? Thank you so much.
Thanks, David. Welcome, everyone. I'm having trouble pulling up the agenda, David. So,
sure.
And I know we have a lot to get to today. So if that's all right, I'll just let you run through it.
Happily.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a somewhat momentous meeting today. I'll put it that way. It's been a long time coming, and yet it came crashing upon us so quickly. Today is the day in which we will finish our meeting, or towards the end of our meeting, vote to approve or not the plan, the initial climate action plan. That's our big goal today, and we will work our way towards that goal. Our agenda for today, it's in the, again, you can see it in those links that we're throwing in the chat. We'll do our usual approval of minutes. We're going to say another word about how we're handling the land acknowledgements next steps. And then we're going to have Jane and Marion just do a quick walkthrough of what the last 24 hours have been like in terms of how this document has evolved. And this isn't looking at every edit, although you can see and track change everything that's happened since the last time you've seen different sections of this document. But I think what we'd like to hear from Marion and Jane is just sort of the high level of what's been going on, how are the changes made, pointing to some things that are important for all of us to see. We see that as just, let's spend 20 minutes just doing that, making sure we understand what happened over the last 24 hours, 48 hours, since we met in our marathon Monday session. Then our proposal for today is actually we hit the pause button on the meeting aspect, and we give ourselves 45 more minutes to sit with the document, right? And we think that's only fair considering the time of night that you received this thing yesterday. And so if folks want more than 45 minutes, I'm certainly open to that. But what we would love to do is just literally hit the pause button on the meeting. Everybody can just calmly go through. If you have a particular section you really want to reread, you do that. If you want to go through and see all the track changes, you can probably do that in 45 minutes, despite it being a 200-something page document. And so that's our recommendation, is we're going to take that time to just all of us read. We'll come back together and we'll have a final discussion. And in that final discussion, I want to set some ground rules. And we talked about these on Monday. I heard your agreement to them on Monday, but I'll say them again now, which is we don't want to open up this document today. There's two things we'll do in that discussion. Three. One is we want to make sure everybody understands what's in there. So if there's a confusion about something that's in there, we can provide clarity in discussion amongst ourselves. Two is if there's an area where you're really uncomfortable and you need to signal that you're going to be wanting to write this little piece of dissent, that's the second thing you can do, is to say, this is just not working for me. I'm going to need to put a dissent in the document, in that appendix that we've talked about. And then third is, if something didn't get edited correctly, based on all the work we did on Monday, right? And there's pretty clear meeting notes from Monday. If something didn't show up correctly in here, then that's the one thing that we could actually do a quick little edit if we had to. And I know Jane and Marion, it just makes them shudder to do that, in part because, as they said, it takes about an hour just to turn this into a PDF. But that's the one area where we'd be willing to do some changes to the document. This is not a great day to do tinkering, right? It's not a great day to say, oh, I'd really like it if it looks like this, or this word doesn't work so well for me. That kind of edit's not going to happen. Nor let's go relitigate how we solve the land use planning office thing, right? We're not going to do that, right? But we do have this possibility of saying, I need to be clear in a dissenting opinion, or you didn't get the edit right. Look at the notes. We asked you to do this. It didn't happen. Okay. So before we go any further, I just want to check on those sort of meeting guidelines for today and what we're trying to do. Let me just actually, before I do that, let me say what's going to happen after that. We will take a formalized vote about adopting the plan so we can see where we land on that. We're going to talk about next steps, what's going to happen immediately this month and sort of looking forward into next year. And we obviously will have public comment today. We have that scheduled around noon. Okay, so that's the agenda. And let me just test ground rules in the agenda itself. Any comments, concerns about that? June, go ahead, please.
Thank you, David. I don't know whether others have this same question. This is a sincere question. I've noticed that in our polling that we've done on a variety of issues, folks take their time to put in their votes, yes or no, etc. And maybe it's helpful to people to be able to see how other people have voted before they cast their own vote. I don't know. But I wanted to just call the issue out to make sure that the group wants to continue to proceed in that manner, because it seems to me for the significance of this vote, it might, I have no problem attaching my name to my vote, but I would feel better having contemporaneous voting, meaning everybody votes at the same time, as opposed to this sort of you go first and then I'll see what I think thing. I just wanted to put that out there in good faith to others and let the group decide how it wants to proceed.
Thanks, June, for that comment. I'd welcome input on it. I'll have to admit, I don't have a great system in place to, I think, do what you're saying, June. Like, I don't have like another way of doing it so that it's everybody does it and then there's a reveal. I'd have to think about it.
We could all send a private text to Jane with our vote in it, for instance.
Okay.
I mean, a private chat, sorry.
Yep. Absolutely. That's a great solution if folks want to do it that way.
I do think
And
that
how we send a private chat, then David, I don't know how to do that.
Oh yeah, we can also had to do that. Absolutely, yeah. Sorry, Jane, go ahead, please. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that we've encouraged in the past that the votes need to be public. So a private chat is one thing, but ultimately the vote on the climate action plan is supposed to be a public vote on who's voting for it.
Right. So I think the question that June asked is, should it be, we're sort of watching the whys of the ends happening, trying to figure out what we do in real time, or there's some more like moment when folks provide that vote and then there's a reveal where everybody can see what happened, right? I think
Yeah, I absolutely, as I said, I have no problem attaching my name to my vote. I just, that's all. It's not about doing a secret ballot, not at all what I'm asking about.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm really just asking for clarification here. I'm not advocating. I wanted to make sure this is something we talked about, because we have not talked about it before, to my knowledge, and I have had some discomfort around the issue.
Okay. So let me ask counselors, do you have a strong opinion one way or the other, whether we have a system in which folks channel a vote all sort of at the same time, but you can't see it, and then we somehow construct it so then there's one big reveal moment and you can see how everybody voted, but it's sort of a simultaneous thing, as June suggests, or doing it the way we've been doing it, where you just put a Y or an N next to your name. Rich?
I think the way we've been doing it is fine. I'm not sure all the different issues that we might vote on today, but there are instances in which if you have a preference to defer to people on the council whose expertise is greater in certain area, or whose participation in a subcommittee suggests that they've thought about this more than I have, I'd like to know how they're voting. I don't mind. It's the way legislatures often do it. And I don't mind doing that in this instance as well. So the way we've been doing it is fine. I don't feel really strongly about it, but I would like to be able to to give some deference to members of subcommittees who have been working on certain issues.
Yeah. And to be very clear, Rich, we're not going to be voting on, I don't think we're voting on specific issues today. We're going to have one big.
If it's one big vote, then as far as I'm concerned, it can go either way.
Great. Thanks, Rich. Kristen, please.
So thank you, David. That was one of my questions. My understanding was that it was going to be one large vote as opposed to section by section. So thank you for clarifying that. But that being said, I know we've talked about dissenting opinions and statements, and I'm wondering if you could discuss how considering that it's a one vote on the entire plan, how are the dissenting voices worked into the plan? How are those circulated? If you could just,
Yeah,
I know that's a rather broad question, but I'm just wondering how that process works.
Yeah, and thanks, Kristen, for that. But I'm glad you brought that up because it's been, we don't have that appendix ready to go today. And so we need to decide as a council, give ourselves a couple days so that folks can prepare those paragraphs or whatever they want to do. And that will be part of an appendix at the end of this plan. And today in the meeting is a great time to signal that you'll be preparing a paragraph on a certain issue. And let's give ourselves a couple days to get that together. And then that'll be attached as part of this plan. And the whole intent behind that is so that you can vote yes on the plan, because you know that dissenting view will be captured as part of the record. And you'll say, this is not okay with me. And with that dissenting view, I feel comfortable saying yes to the whole plan. Secretary Moore?
I'm a bit concerned about not having, at least to the extent folks have statements of dissent that are ready, and recognizing we're at the 5 minutes to midnight here.
Mm-hmm.
I am concerned about not having them actually embedded in the plan to the extent that they're ready. I think there's opportunity to continue to add to them. Obviously, we flagged a handful, 4 areas throughout the deliberations, and where we've voted no, and would like the opportunity for those to actually be embedded as part of the plan that's adopted. I don't know if others have been developing, knowing that there were sort of sprinkles of no votes throughout. If anyone else is developing dissenting opinions, I think leaving open the opportunity to continue to add to that is appropriate and important. But at the same time, to the extent folks have stuff prepared that could be incorporated today, I think it should be incorporated today so that it goes forward with the plan.
Thank you for that. My great hope is that today, before we do this vote on the plan, we at least have a list of these are the 6 issues in which folks are going to be preparing something over the coming days. And so we have some real clarity about what those issues are, and that can even be stapled to the PDF, right, as the actual appendix, saying anticipate brief statements of dissent on these issues from counselors. Catherine?
Thanks. I'm going to offer an opinion different than Julie's, simply because it's been stated up until this moment that dissenting opinions would be added after adoption of the plan. So I think those of us, including myself, who were thinking about a dissenting opinion on one area, believed we had more time. So, and I think it would be more fair if all of the dissenting opinions were collected and released at the same time.
Great. Catherine, do you think it would be helpful today to have a sort of short list of who is anticipating or something, so it's signaled in the document that leaves today, even if the actual text isn't there?
If we can get to that, yes, I think it could be helpful. And it may be that people are able to note that. Maybe we can do something with our forum so you can note that with your vote, like where you plan to offer a dissent, and then we can at least have that. Also, that as an idea.
Interesting. Okay. While folks are reading, I could could write that up as a little form. Yep.
And then if we leave today with a deadline for when we need those, I think that would be able to collect them all together and release them at once, I think would really make sense from my perspective.
Thanks, Catherine. Helpful. June?
To Catherine's point, I just wanted to offer this for what it's worth. Certainly when the PUC has decided cases, sometimes for a variety of reasons, whether it's logistics or other, they have announced that there is a dissent in their order. And they have also said, and the explanation of that vote will follow. So it's not uncommon to do that, where you simply say, I plan to dissent on this point or that point, and I will, give you the follow-up afterwards. And maybe that's a way to split this for folks who are in Catherine's position, just offering that as a neutral, if I'm even able to be neutral.
Thanks, June.
As a friend to the council.
Okay, so what I am hearing is a good pathway for us today on this issue of dissent is when we do the voting, we can, or in and around there or just before there, we can create some sort of pathway for you to signal that you expect to have a dissent on a certain issue, and you can name that issue. So we could create a space for you to write that, and that we can have at least clear by today is where we will expect that in the sort of signal, as June says, or Catherine suggested. So, and then we'll give ourselves a deadline to pull that all together and put that out. Okay. I think that makes sense. I don't think we actually resolved the issue of how to do the vote. Joey, go ahead.
This is not related to the vote, just if there are dissenting opinions, I do wonder if it would be helpful if people articulated a solution or a direction they would like to see as an alternative. That would be very helpful, I think.
Right. And with the caveat that it's not an alternative for today's version of the plan. It's an alternative thinking forward as the council continues.
Directionally.
Yes. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Joey. Okay. And in terms of we haven't quite decided here. Jane, go ahead.
Well, I just had some folks direct message me in the chat suggesting that we could hold some time, and then sort of do a 1, 2, 3, and everybody put their vote at the same time. So give a few minutes, but everybody can drop their yes or no into the Excel at the same, with the expectation it would all hit at the same time, if that was a simplistic way of doing it.
Yeah, and less room for error, right? If there's all kinds of private text and things happening, which makes me nervous. Okay, thanks, Jane. So let me just suggest here, folks, that what Jane puts out as a suggestion sounds pretty like a good compromise on this issue of rolling votes versus everybody does it at the same time. So I'll suggest that we use our same handy dandy Excel sheet, but we give ourselves this requirement that we, 1, 2, 3, put your vote in kind of thing. And if folks are comfortable with that, we can run it that way today when we take that vote. Okay. Any concerns with running it that way? Great. Okay, let's do it. And we will also create that space so it's easy for you to signal, and we can do it verbally in the meeting as well today, but a space for you to signal if there's an issue of which you expect to write up a dissent. Okay, great. Sue, go ahead, please.
I'm just trying to understand this dissent issue, and is that something we will do before taking the vote on the whole document?
Correct.
And I know there's been discussion of, what is sort of the intent or content of your dissent? Because I'm wondering if someone puts forth that, might others want to join in, and what would be the process of that? I don't know. I don't know that we've, or I haven't been aware of this dissent process before. So
yeah. So if folks say, when folks signal what issue they're interested in providing a dissent on, and if folks are saying the same issue, Jane and I, Marion, can help you coordinate to write a single thing, because that probably will be more powerful than several people doing something separate. So that's what our recommendation is. We started to do that last week when we had an issue that we thought there would be a dissent on. In the end, we came back and solved it. There may still be a dissent from the other direction. So Jane and I and Marion can help you all coordinate if you feel similarly on an issue, and do that over the coming days. The idea is we're writing paragraphs. We're not writing tomes, right? We're writing a paragraph that says, you know, I have this concern on this issue. This is why, blah, 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 right? And Joey gives us a nice view of, in going forward, I would like to see, right? That kind of thing.
And then others would be given the opportunity to join that dissent? Is that how you envision that? And what would be the process of that? That's what I'm trying to understand.
I think it's more simple than that, Sue, where it's like, oh, these 3 people all said that they're concerned about this. I'll make an email chain and you all work on a shared paragraph. But that's why it's important to signal today.
Yes, it's important. What we're doing is being watched and will be reported on. And the degree to which there is dissent will be of interest. And I think it'd be helpful to be clear on that.
Yeah. And again, this is what we create this space for dissent on specific issues. And the whole purpose of that is to allow you to signal on this issue, I'm not comfortable. I am willing to walk forward with this overall plan. That's the intent. Not to prejudge the fact that you may say, no, I'm not willing to walk forward, but that's the intent behind having these individual specific issue dissents. Okay. And this has been, we've been signaling this in the decision-making protocol since the, I think since the March, but more directly since we started looking at decision-making in September.
Agreed. I don't want to suggest that we haven't discussed this. The process of doing it and the timing of that and how and whether people join, all of that, we haven't kind of gone through. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So you're right. We have not. Absolutely. Okay. So we have a strategy for our vote on the whole plan. We've said a little bit more about how to do the dissent piece. And so we're going to do that before we do our vote. I signaled sort of guidelines for our conversation today about what we're opening up and what we're not opening up in terms of actual modification of the document. Let me just pause and say, any concerns about these guidelines and how we want to work today and what today is going to look like? Okay, great. And I will send to counselors, and maybe Marion, if you could actually over email send to counselors and we can, or private chat, the link to that Excel sheet, because we'll use the same one. I'll put a new tab on it. Iris, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I was just wanting to clarify if we're going to have the opportunity to add signing statements that are not specific dissents to a specific issue that wasn't included, but may sort of add on to why we're voting the way we are.
That we have not created, excuse me, we have not created a space for that. And I have concerns about it because it opens up just an enormous amount. I think there is time verbally today to do that, right? There is time verbally to say, I really want all of you counselors to know, and anybody else who's listening, this is how my head is working on this when I vote today or I create a dissent. Verbally, we can do that. We don't have a space in the plan for that in a written form. Okay. June?
But with that said, David, I've been a proponent of archiving for this process, and I don't see what would foreclose somebody like Iris from providing such a statement. It's not necessarily for integration into the plan. As you say, we need to be careful about the parameters of the document, but I don't see why she or anybody else couldn't write a letter, if you will, to the council that then becomes a matter of public historic record.
That sounds like a great idea. And I think what I'm being cautious about from what June heard is like having all this stuff become part of the plan, the actual plan, having it be part of the record, having it be a public document sounds wonderful. And so if folks feel moved to do that, absolutely. That's open. Chris?
Yeah, what Iris just suggested, the signing statement, that's ostensibly what I'm going to be submitting as a dissent.
Okay. Again, I think that's in the spirit of saying I am very uncomfortable with something, and that's and I think if that's exactly what this is for. I think a broader statement of sort of explaining this is what I'm doing, I think that would go down the path like what June said. Jane?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to clarify because I completely appreciate what Iris suggested and June's suggested response on how to handle that. But as far as dissenting opinions in the climate action plan, I really urge us to think about caution there. And they are supposed to be related to a specific action, not an overall dissent of a tone of the plan or things into that nature. They're supposed to be related to a specific issue in the plan, therefore within the body of the pathway strategies and actions. And that is how we've envisioned them from the beginning and put them forward within the process that we've laid out. So I just urge folks to move forward with caution about broad letters of dissent that speak to the overarching components of the plan. That's not what was intended.
Thanks, Jane. That's exactly right. Yeah. Okay, June?
I take Jane's point. I think with that said, I won't speak for Iris. I didn't hear that she wanted to dissent. I heard that she wanted to explain her vote.
Yeah.
And I just think that the parameters of the plan will be absolutely clear, or we will make every commitment, would be my suggestion, that is a document that has 4 corners that define the plan. But, folks, if we have time today to speak, then that means we have space to have a written version of that statement and to archive it someplace.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important that that the people who come after us be able to see the fullest possible record of who we were in making these judgments. And as much as I appreciate the recorded versions, documents have a way of living longer. I don't know. I need to step down now, but
Right.
Jane, I don't think we're contradicting each other. And I appreciate the drive you're showing to make sure that the document itself is defined and secured. And since I've grabbed this microphone, I might also take the opportunity to thank you and the people who've worked with you for this superhuman effort that has gone into bringing this thing in on time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, June. Chris?
Yeah, just for reasons that I've mentioned before, this isn't a threat at all. It's just how I feel about it. If I can't basically explain why I vote the way I'm intending to vote, I'm going to have to vote no. So I'm going to have to put my vote in context, because there are things that I expect out of future iterations of the plan, particularly the planning process, that if I can't speak to those, it's going to make me hard to support what we've produced to date. And that's just from speaking for me personally. If I can, as a dissenting opinion, explain why I'm voting the way I intend to vote, it makes that a lot easier. So I just wanted to, that's just my approach to how I'm addressing this.
So Chris, I think it's absolutely appropriate for you to be able to say that. And I think if you want to include that as a clear statement of dissent, that's fine too, right? And I think the caution is just, tying that to the content of the plan and its plan process is important for its inclusion in that appendix at the bottom. Okay. All right. Is there anything else we need to say about this as we step forward into this important milestone? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so what we want to do is our approval of minutes. We worked hard to make some very specific minutes from last meeting, November 29th. They are hyperlinked and linked in the agenda. I'll give folks a moment if they want to just open those up and take a look at those minutes. Let me just give folks a minute. Okay, does anybody need a little more time on the minutes from the 29th? Are there any concerns about those minutes? Okay, great. So let's consider those minutes to be approved. Thanks, everybody. We wanted to, as a just transitions reflection this morning, circle back on the plan for a land acknowledgement in the climate action plan. And I'll turn it to Jane to walk us through. Oh, sorry, Secretary Moore, I just saw your hand.
I don't mean to take us backward. I'm just sort of continuing to roll around in my mind the idea of a signing statement and wonder if we don't need to provide space for that in the plan and allow each counselor the opportunity to produce such, to include it with the document. I think, you know, they're sort of to Chris's point, people are going to have to make a decision ultimately up or down. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of nuance in those votes and things we want to make sure to identify. I know personally, I would feel a lot better about the opportunity to have that kind of signing statement. And I think, again, ultimately including them in the plan allows each of us to sort of give a little bit of voice to our particular perspective that goes beyond specific areas of dissent. And so I guess I'm asking that the council consider adding a section, an appendix or a section of the report, and each counselor be given the opportunity to provide such a statement.
I'm seeing some enthusiasm on this point from counselors. I just want to note that, and I think this is absolutely something that you all can decide to say, this is what we want at the back of the plan in this appendix, is not only these specific issue dissents, but a sort of those who feel moved are welcome to provide sort of a complimentary statement about what's going on in their vote. Rich and then Chris.
I'm suggesting that we shouldn't do that. I realize people may feel the need to express their opinions, but I agree with the earlier comment that they should be converted to writing and included in the public record, but not as a part of the plan per se. I'm echoing June here, saying that the plan is a document with legal force, and the four corners of the plan state what the plan includes. Legislators frequently write opinions to explain why they voted the way they voted, but they aren't included in the law. They're just a separate document. So I'd recommend, to the extent that we want to do that, that we invite people to write statements and that we include them as a separate document, not as part of the plan itself.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the crux of what we're trying to figure out, is exactly how to where those signing statements end up. Chris, you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to have them attached as an appendix. I don't know exactly what, I mean, I don't know if the appendix is the garage attached to the house of the four corners of the plan, but if my dissent or my signing statement's not going to be included somewhere with the you know, associated with the plan, I'm going to have difficulty voting for it. And some of us were appointed to represent perspectives, not just our own opinions, but also broader perspectives. And there may be the need to be able to speak on, behalf of that broader perspective for which we were appointed to represent. For others, it may be, their life experience or, their own personal perspective. And I just think we need to create room for that. Some folk here may even be representing communities that they need to speak to and want to have that memorialized. I don't think making the public, making policymakers and others chase down the comments in minutes or something like that is going to be particularly effective or appropriate. Because if you want to say, I explained why I voted the way I did, you can try to find them in the minutes on this thus and so line. That's not a very good look. If you say, look in the appendix in the plan on the signing statements or record of dissents or something like that, that's different. This isn't legislation. This is a plan, and it's not uncommon for plans to have an appendix where it records not only public comment, but also the comments of the people who ultimately voted for it. And I think it's wholly appropriate.
I wonder,
Let me chime in quickly just to say,
Yeah.
I'm persuaded by Chris's view, as I often am. And I think we can come up with a way to physically record people's views in a way that accomplishes what he's after.
So let me just quick test with folks, particularly those who are planning on writing something, either the version of a very specific issue dissent or this sort of broader signing statement idea. Would it be helpful to merge those into one appendix, or is it helpful to maintain both as separate ideas that are sort of separate appendices? So that you could have some issue specific things, and then you could have a separate thing with just sort of signing statements, right? So if we pull those apart and have one that's very sort of issue specific, like on issue X, I really need to signal this, right? And then we can have a separate appendix for those who feel moved to say, I need to explain more holistically what I was doing here. And yeah, okay. So it sounds like I'm seeing in the chat as well, some interest in the separate. So why don't, without me going too far out on a limb here, it sounds like there's two separate things here. One is very issue specific dissents where we just want to lean into some detail on that issue. And the other is a broader sort of signing statement space where those who feel moved can say, this is what I did here. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of, all the comments in the chat are supporting that sort of separate thing. We need to give ourselves a time frame to do that, but you all can set that time frame. It's not, there's no pressure on our end to do that. I just think we give ourselves whatever we need, a week or something, and then we can pull that together. Okay. All right. So great. I'm seeing a lot of interest in the chat. Any concerns with doing that? Let me just test with all of you who are not typing in the chat right now. Any concerns with essentially what we've just done is, in addition to a very issue specific statement that folks could make, what we're calling a dissent, we're adding a second appendix that is a landing place for anybody who feels they want to explain their vote or their work more clearly. And we can call that a signing statement, for instance. Any concerns with that? Okay, great. All right. This is why it's important to have the conversation. You get to a better result. Wonderful. All right. Okay, so we have those two things. And I think what we'll still ask today is if there's an issue specific dissent piece that folks would like to write, let's figure that out today, at least get a signal from you so we can do what Sue was asking, which is the mechanics of helping people formulate something together if they want to. Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So let's treat that as approved by you, this plan of the two separate things, and we'll give ourselves we can confirm. It just occurs to me, give ourselves a week or something like that to get those in to Jane so that we could include those in a follow-up appendix. Okay, Jane?
Just to think through the process for 1 minute with you all. We have a meeting next Tuesday of the council and then not again for 2 weeks. We gave ourselves a deadline of 2 weeks from today to compile all of the appendices that will be included with the climate action plan and updated. And so I just want to check if folks have any interest in reviewing any of the dissenting opinions and or the signing statements. And if so, I would encourage us to have those prepared not by Monday of next week so that they could be posted for our meeting on Tuesday and commented on and discussed if folks are interested. Otherwise, I don't think there'll be time to review as a council.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, Chris?
Jade, I think they are what they are, that we don't need to review them. We've already discussed the plan, and these are our own personal, or maybe there'll be subsets of members or something who might come up with something, but I don't think you have to worry about that. I think, and for your perspective, staffing this, I would think it's going to be a matter of compilation. I would hope, time wise, you're just collecting them and putting them in some kind of order, just by alphabetical or whatever. But you're not going to have to worry about editing them or anything. It's just you receive them and they go into an appendix and that's it.
Yeah.
Yep, that all makes sense with the signing statements. I'm not sure I necessarily agree the same with the dissenting opinions, since there are strong statements likely to be added onto the plan. So, and we're talking about two separate things. So if that's what you all feel for the dissenting opinions too, I just want to check.
I think there's going to be a process. We'll see how it goes today, right? But if there's some issue-specific things that people want to signal a different view on, there will be a process in the coming days. If there's more than one person on that issue of getting those folks together, somebody does an initial paragraph, others weigh in, and you decide if that's what it looks like. And there, if you want any editorial help from Jane or Marion, that's great. If you don't, that's great too. Okay. All right. I think we've gone where we need to go on that. And thanks for circling back, because I think we got to a better outcome. Okay. All right, so let's then keep going. I was just turning it over to Jane to talk about the land acknowledgement and the next steps on that before we look at the overall document.
Great, thank you all. In line with our Just Transitions reflection this morning, I wanted to follow up on a process that I'd like to put forward for compilation and learning around the documentation for a land acknowledgement in the opening section of the CAP. You'll see that Marion has provided a page in the PDF online that shows where the land acknowledgement will go, as well as speaks to a timeline of doing that with all of you this month of December. I've had some lovely conversations with Judy Dow earlier this week, and she's agreed, as she does this professionally with both schools, with the Social Caucus of the Legislature, and others, to work through the training and understanding in order to develop a land acknowledgement. And she's agreed to join us at our December 21st meeting at the beginning to walk us through the process of developing one and set us off on a journey of drafting it together, of which she would consult on that final language for us. So my hope and expectation is that by the end of the month, we could adopt a land acknowledgement that we would include in front and center in our climate action plan. But appreciating that it's not just about words on paper. It's about the learning and understanding that goes along with drafting that together as a group. We're not prepared to put it in the plan today, but hope and trust that you all will support inviting Judy in for a conversation at a meeting later this month to develop that with you all. That's really all I wanted to highlight for you all today, and just sort of check the pulse and make sure people feel committed to giving the time to that, which will be up to, I think Judy has asked for 2 hours of that meeting.
Thanks, Jane. Any comments or concerns about the pathway ahead on this issue? Okay. Great. Okay. Thanks, Jane. Thanks for shepherding that forward. And I believe Bram and others had a role in shepherding that forward too. So thanks to those of you who did that. Okay, so now we want to just get the overview from Marion and Jane about what's happened in the last 24 hours or 36 hours to the draft. My thinking on this, Jane, was to have you just speak in sort of broad terms, and if we want to be scrolling through on a screen, that's fine too. But just speak sort of what's happened and what you want to draw people's attention to in the document that they received last night. So why don't we take 10, 15 minutes, whatever you need to do that walkthrough to say, counselors, I want to make sure you're seeing these things in the document that you received.
Okay, great, thank you. I will start and ask Marion to fill in anything that I might overlook or miss, as this really was a joint effort between Marion and I over the last day and a half or so to work towards the PDF and the track change version online. So as you all know, any substantive changes that were made to the cap, the expectation is the only changes that were made between what you all reviewed coming into the meeting this week and today are all reflected and noted in the minutes, which is what I tried to draw your attention to in the email last night. We have excellent minutes from CBI for both the 23rd and the 29th that documented the changes with respect to the actions and strategies within the document and some of the more broad ideas that you wanted to see reflected in this final initial plan. And I really encourage folks, as you dive into looking at it today, if you haven't already, the track change version is messy and the PDF document is cleaner, and really hope that you'll be able to reflect between the minutes and the PDF to look for things that you're interested in making sure were reflected the way you'd like to see them. At a high level, the more administrative editorial comments that we made had a lot to do with significant revisions to the executive summary from comments that we received through draft edits. I don't think substantively it really changed, but there were a lot of edits throughout that section of it. We did a lot of thinking about how to reflect a concise and appropriate table of contents. We had at one point thought about having all the pathways hyperlinked so you could jump to a specific pathway, but it got kind of overwhelming in the table of contents. So we stuck with just the sections themselves for people to move around to. We added an acknowledgement section last night, and we did our best to reflect all of the council members, subcommittee members, state staff that were involved in this process, and the consultants as well. I already know this morning that I missed some people, and Marion has been updating that as we speak. So there are some things that are still minor revisions that we're making on the fly this morning. We have also made sure that the implementation section at the end of the plan captured and reflected a number of comments and questions that came up around how we speak to the funding components, the order of operations in the plan. The measuring and progress section that came after implementation was moved up above the implementation, and we also added in rural resilience and adaptation's measurable goals to that section and spoke to how we hope to advance measurable progress associated with those in the coming months as we think about how we track progress associated with the climate action plan. That's largely editorial comments that were made throughout the plan. I should say also in the implementation section, we pulled all of the tabled actions, of which there were really just the suite of actions associated with the biomass strategy, as well as the tax, the pilot, the program suggested around piloting a new tax structure for land based on land. Those were the only tabled actions that we reflected then at the end and spoke to how the council will deal with those going forward and the progress that you'd like to see made associated with those. So that is in the implementation section. And then throughout the body of the actual plan, the tabled actions were pulled from the particular sections. There were minor changes of language associated with the transportation section that you spoke to the other day around how to speak to TCI program. There was new clean heat standard language proposed to reflect some of the conversation that we had with June and Catherine around rural communities and other components. That is all in there. There were cross references made between the mitigation and agriculture section and the sequestration section, reflecting the fact that the strategies and actions are the same in both of those sections, and we spoke back and forth to that in both of those sections. And then any other language tweaks or things that were reflected in the minutes, Marion did an excellent job along with the notes and minutes in keeping a running list of all the things that we spoke to over the last two meetings. And we divided and conquered and went through and did most of it. So I expect that everything is largely in there that we've talked about. It's just a matter of where we had to take liberty in crafting new language that I ask that you look at it and make sure it reflects what you want to see. The only large new language section that I think I didn't just speak to was around the education pathway. And thank you so much to Iris, who worked with Secretary Moore and Judy to come up with language there around how we reflect education and training within state agencies going forward. And then looking back as well, thinking about language in the past and the harm it has done and how to correct that. So I believe everything is there, but that's me going from a running list of notes myself that I wanted to touch on for all of you. And so Marion, who's sitting right across from me, if she has anything else that I might have missed, really ask that she touch on it, but want to give you all the space to review the minutes yourself and look at the PDF to make sure it's captured correctly.
So if Marion, if there's anything else you'd like to say, feel free. I will say that, so there's like one or two areas, and Jane mentioned the education section and the language issue, where on Monday we left off saying these three people are going to work together to solve it. And so we didn't actually see the language on Monday, and now you're seeing it in the document. So that education section is one of it. And as Jane mentioned, Iris and Secretary Moore and Judy Dow worked on that. And then there was one other in buildings, I think, where Dave was going to go back and do some language, right, Jane?
Yes, so that has to do with the clean heat standard and language throughout the buildings and thermal section. That was done. And yeah, Jared had a great section in the chat. Maybe that was you, David. I'm not sure who put that. The flagging the workforce section has new language as well, and Marion took the lead on adding that in the cross-cutting themes in a way that hopefully speaks to the further work that still needs to be done in that area.
Great. Okay, so there's a few areas where we left it on Monday, like, yep, we know what kind of language we want. We send these folks off to do it, and they did it. So you can go in and look at that and make sure you're good with that. Okay. Anything else to say before we take a reading break? Do counselors have any specific concern about sort of what happened before we break and spend some time just with the document individually? the councilors have any questions about the last 24 hours, 36 hours? Catherine?
I just want to express thanks to Mary and Jane before I ask my question, which I'm sure we all share. So the track changes version actually is pretty clean. It's not messy based on my past experience with plan writing. So I'm finding it really easy to scroll through, and I really appreciate having that. And so I believe the answer is yes, but just want to verify that the PDF and track changes are the same. So if I review the track changes, I'm good. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, absolutely. And with the what's happened, what Jane said, you've been doing a few things this morning, and that was adding in names in the acknowledgement sections, right? That's the only thing you've done this morning. Yeah. Okay. Sue, go ahead, please.
Just a quick question. A land acknowledgement is eventually going to be a part of this document. I'm just verifying that because I'm seeing the space, but we are going to say this is under production as we present the plan. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think it'll be exactly the way it is in this document, whatever page 4, and it'll be that language. Okay, great. Okay, anything else before we take a break here?
Yeah, Julie has already flagged for Marion and I, one of the things that was discussed and is reflected in the minute around language in that we didn't get quite right in our revision. So I'm going to put it right out here now because I want to say that while you all are reading, we're going to make this change. And we're just going to say it out loud so you all understand and expect it. Under the Ag and Ecosystem Land Use Pathway, Strategy 2, Action S, related to expanding the flood hazard rule, Julie had flagged that this would require legislation and that the action should direct the legislature to authorize A&R to expand the rule. We didn't catch that one component in the revisions, and so we will make that minor change right now, and we all agreed to that. So just want to put that out there.
Thanks, Jane. And could you say it just one more time, a little more slowly? Which strategy and action is it?
It's Strategy 2, Action F in the Ag and Ecosystem. It's in the Building Resilience and Adaptation into the Natural and Working Land section. Strategy 2, Action F, and it has to do with to deal with that rule, we would need the legislature to tell A&R to authorize A&R to expand the rule.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, Jane. Okay, great. So unless there's other points of clarification we want to do before a break, let me just check. Does 45 minutes seem like the right reading space? I'm happy for suggestions on less or more. It felt like the right level when we were setting this agenda. So my suggestion is we take 45 minutes, we get into this document, we make sure we've read the pieces we want to read. We've looked, as Catherine says, while the track change, there's a lot of track change. Honestly, it's in terms of substance, you can go through it quickly. So the track change doc is a good way to do the express version of the changes. Any other things? Okay, so let's get back a little less than 45 minutes. Let's come back at 10:15. So about 40 something minutes. And I'm going to turn off my camera and we'll stop the recording. I'll put myself on mute, and at 10:15 we'll come back and we'll do any final discussion we need to have around content after you've had this chance to read. And we will then make our way towards voting on agreeing. So we'll see you back. Jane, you want to say something quick?
Do you just want to suggest that, like the comment that Secretary Moore just caught, those are important things that if we have missed things like that do change the intent of actions. If you you can email me or private chat me in the Zoom, and Marion and I can be keeping track of that over these 45 minutes in case we've missed something critical still that was already discussed and approved by the council. That's the intent of that, really, is to keep it narrow to anything that was critical that we discussed that we somehow missed in compiling this final PDF. And we'll do our best to make those changes on the fly over the course of the next 45 minutes and post a revised PDF that includes those.
Thanks, Jane. Great. Okay. Okay, folks, we'll see you back here at 10:15. Happy reading and look forward to the conversation on the back end of it. Okay, so see you at 10:15 and we'll put a slide up with that. Another 5 minutes. Great. Welcome back, folks. If somebody is desperate for another 5 minutes, I am open to that request for sure. But let's pull back into the meeting and see where we are and how we're doing. Wait for a critical mass of folks to get their cameras back on. Welcome back, folks.
David, while we're waiting for a critical mass, I just want to throw in that I would like more time. I don't need another hour, but maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yeah.
I know other folks from the administration would request the same.
Great. I am open to that. I absolutely think it's a priority. So if unless there are protestations from others or concerns, I would say if you all want to take 20 more minutes, take 20 more minutes. We've got the morning here to do this. And that seems like a high priority so that folks have that comfort level. So if you're just joining up, Kristen suggested another 15, 20 minutes of review time, individual review time. And from a process standpoint, that seems great. I have no problems with that. So quick, any concerns about turning cameras back off for another 15, let's call it 20 minutes. If it's, what would that be? It'd be 10:40 or a little before 10:40. Any concerns with that? Okay, so why don't we, is that too long, 10:40? That'll be like 23 minutes. Is it good? Okay. Let's come back at 10:40. I know some of you have been emailing Jane with things that you found. Please do that because that allows us to get organized and sort of be more organized with the things that might have got overlooked. So please do email Jane and or Marion on that. We are, folks, circling back at 10:40 and we'll see you back here at 10:40. I'll ask Cameron to put another slide up that says reading break continued until 10:40. Thanks, Kristen, for that suggestion. Okay, great. We'll see you guys back here, 10:40. All right, so welcome back, counselors. Good to see you. Hello, Kaya, good to see you as well. Okay. All right, so we are back. I'm seeing a critical mass of us back, otherwise known as a quorum. Yes, okay, great. Okay, wonderful. So there's kind of a two-step process now in this discussion. One is, I know several of you have emailed Jane and Marion with some catches, things that didn't quite get done right. And so why don't we give Jane and Marion a moment to walk us through that summary of things that needs to be better reflecting the minutes. And then the second step of this is anything else that you all want to bring up, just as a comment or anything else that isn't in this list that Jane and Marion are about to say. Then we're going to talk about how we're going to do our voting and naming the dissents and that kind of stuff. So first, Jane, you've got a list of things that folks had sent you. Do you want to walk us through them?
Yeah.
And do you want to
so,
share your screen while you do it? Do you want me to share? What would you like to do?
Well, I think I'm going to tell you. Okay, our plan is to tell you the handful of edits and changes that we just made, with one that actually needs a decision point right now still by the council. And then Marion and I have been making the edits directly into the PDF. And our intent is, again, to pause. We did not reload the PDF with these final changes. Let the conversation ensue and make sure we didn't miss anything else. And then we need about 15 minutes to update the PDF and have the actual final PDF online for you all. So let me just talk through the minor edits and then the one sort of larger question that we have for all of you. There aren't so many that it should be overwhelming. So basic things, we made all the edits and the acknowledgements, added in the staff that people asked, and corrected subcommittee membership where folks noted there were changes that needed to be made. In both the executive summary and the implementation section of the CAP, there are council next steps that are identical in both sections that speak to the work of the ongoing work for the council. We did two clarifying components of that. In the section that spoke to the technical analyses, we added an end statement that says finish prioritizing, ongoing technical analyses, which got us to speak to the Vermont Pathways report that we are still finalizing and hasn't been included here. So we did, rather than adding a separate bullet specific to the Pathways report, we just clarified that one statement around not only prioritizing new technical analyses, but seeing through the ongoing work that we're doing now. We also added another step that speaks to further refinement of strategies to supplement the transportation emissions reductions that we need to make, appreciating that TCI is likely not coming back online for a while, if ever. So we added a section there, just a bullet. We went through and scrubbed the whole document to make sure that where it says resiliency, it now says resilience, not that, and cleaned that up. We made the change to the flood hazard strategy and action that Secretary Moore reminded us of early on that I spoke to. In the work of ag and ecosystems, building resilience and adaptation in the natural and working lands, we also removed the word penalize that we were supposed to have done in Pathway 4, Strategy 5, Action C. There is one reference in the Climate Action Plan that speaks to climate modeling. Rather than referencing climate modeling nationally, we spoke to the actual climate change projection section that Leslie Ann and Jay wrote for our very own Climate Action Plan. We were able to add language in that connected the nexus between affordable housing and resilience on page 166, Strategy 3. Thank you to Catherine for reminding us to do that. We had a section still around the state land use planning office and state land use plan section on page 223 and 224, where we removed D from that. That was a holdover from that we didn't catch. We added in a new D that spoke to a separate bullet of land banking that had gotten kind of merged with the bullet above. And we changed past legislation to encourage the legislature to act, which is how we had spoke to it in our meeting and agreed to reflect it in that section. We made one check section that Abby caught around in the workforce cross-cutting themes. Right now, we had alluded to the fact that it didn't have direct ties to greenhouse gas emission reductions, but we added language to ensure that we did have a direct tie from this as an enabling action to help us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And then finally, the one thing that may require some conversation is the biomass suite of the strategy and actions that were moved to implementation. We clarified the sentence that we had intended to put in there that spoke directly to the collaboration needed between cross-sector mitigation and ag and ecosystems to advance new language in that area by spring of 2022, if possible. Recognizing that we also wanted to give ourselves out and out if the process needed more time to evolve in a just way. There is one question there that referencing back to how we reflected it in the minute. We suggested in the minute that we would not actually put the suite of actions in the tabled section there in the implementation. Some folks would rather remove those actions, speak to the ongoing work, and reference the most recent work of the Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee, but not actually list those actions. So we're happy to reference the subcommittee work there, but before I removed those tabled actions, I just wanted to check in because that felt a little ambiguous to me about how we had left that.
Okay.
And I see one other little spelling errors that Chris Campany has sent me in the chat. We'll make those corrections.
Great. Okay. Super. So that's a list of changes. And before we jump to that last one where Jane says she really wants you to weigh in as a council to make sure we remember our intent the last time we talked about it. On the ones before that, anything that, and when Jane did that list, anything that's confusing or doesn't make sense or needs just one more round of understanding of that punch list that Jane just walked through? Okay. Great. On the biomass issue, I think it is helpful. Liz, go ahead, please.
I just want a clarification before we talk about the biomass issue. I'm looking at the red line version and the table was redlined. So can you tell me specifically where there's something that requires potential further removal?
Yeah, it's in the implementation section. Go ahead, Jane, sorry.
In the implementation section,
page
I
or
did list
something.
the action. Yep, I'll find the page for you.
Okay, I see. Yeah, my clear memory is that we were going to remove it from the plan. So if it's repeated in the implementation section is what you're saying, then I would think that that would be a place we would remove it and reference the action that we still have to do.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, maybe just to make sure it's explicitly clear. In the section of the body of the cap, we removed the strategy, the action, and the table that describes the reference to the foundational criteria and all of that. And then in the implementation section, we had said that we would speak to our work that we want to do with tabled actions, and we would actually list the tabled actions in the implementation section. So it was clear that there was an explanation that there were these important actions that were discussed. They're higher than the actions that weren't prioritized for the plan. And so I didn't put the table around the foundational criteria in, but I did list the actions with all the caveats above. But yeah, Marion can share her screen and show you how we reflected it in the implementation table, in the implementation section, I should say.
And so I think this is one of these issues where we do a little piece of memory. I just pasted in the very specific part of the notes that talked about how we wanted to reflect this in the implementation section. And my memory is similar to Liz's, and I think the notes reflect that, in that we wanted to flag this in the implementation section. We wanted to provide a clear time frame for us to do this and showing our intent to work on these issues. And then we wanted to reflect the detail of the issues back to the subcommittee's work, which suggests that, and we spoke specifically about not having all the detail in my memory of it in the implementation section, and having that detail in the subcommittee's output, right? Which also has its own caveat saying this wasn't a consensus recommendation from the subcommittee. So that was my memory, and I think the notes suggest that too. And I just want to check if others had the same, or others had perhaps different memory of exactly how we said we wanted this reflected in the implementation section. Okay.
That's great. So I will add one more sentence that speaks to referencing the subcommittee's most recent work, as in that will be included in the appendix, and we'll take out the tabled biomass action. My only other question is then we only have one other tabled action, but we'll list that one here, which we'll work on how that looks for a minute because it'll look a little funny. That's
okay. Okay. Great. And maybe the way to make that, Jane, not look so funny is it's not listed as an actual like action. It's just a description of, you know, do a pilot, blah, 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 right?
Yep.
Okay. Super. Okay. So that was Jane's list. Thanks, everybody. And here's an opportunity, if there's something you didn't send Jane an email about something that didn't match up to the notes and what we discussed in previous meetings. Is there anything else out there that you didn't send an email? Leslie Ann, please go ahead.
Thanks, David. So I was reading through and trying to see the threads that were running through the entire document. And I know we're not going to get to this today, but I did want to have it on the record as a flag, that there's some places where the human element doesn't come through really, really strongly. We did a great job on the built environment. We did a great job on the natural environment, but there's some elements of climate change, humans, mitigation, and how that affects and plays out for humans that I think we need to sort of just keep at the back of our minds as we kind of step on through. And in particular, pieces around human health. And as we step through post 1st of December, maybe thinking of broadening out some of the expertise that might help us to get to where we need to get to in terms of a more concerted effort to bring the Department of Health on board, maybe some social scientists, some psychologists who would help us to sort of work through some of those pieces that we're trying to do. And then the other piece that I was looking for that I think we didn't have that needle threaded as well were some of the hazards that sort of cut across the various sectors that we're looking at. And I'm thinking about the fact that there's some farmers who are contemplating going out of business because of the droughts that have been occurring in the last few years. And so when we think about all of the sectors that we're trying to adapt or mitigate against in terms of climate change, it can't only be about flooding. It has to be about all of these various things that people deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I just wanted to flag those two as we step through, because today is not the end, it's the beginning. And I just wanted to have that on the public record of where some of those starting points are in terms of peoples and in terms of sectors and all of the hazards that people face on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks, Leslie Ann. That is great. And we will keep that in today's record and keep that going forward with us in our work for sure. Bram?
Yeah, three quick things. First of all, I hope Lauren will forgive me, but on page 230 of the track changes version, action C, adopt a state policy of no net loss. In the text 2 pages above, we had amended that. And although I liked it the way it was, I hope this is a demonstration of my good character that I'm pointing out that correction, that change did not get carried through to the table on page 230.
Thanks, Bram. Really appreciate that. So the table doesn't reflect the change that we had agreed to as a council. Yeah.
Yeah, the text does, but the table doesn't. So next on page 289 of the track changes version, let me just scroll there. Yes, so and these don't have line numbers. Under the public education section, halfway through line 4 of the public education section, it says for the first update of the cap in 2025, I think what we want to say is of the cap in or before 2025.
Yeah. Good catch. Thanks, Bram. Did you see that, Jane and Marion, where that is? Yeah.
And
thanks.
Last, on the very last page, 315, we have a list of 14 appendices, but that list does not include the 2 we talked about today, the appendix of dissenting opinions and the appendix of signed statements by counselors.
Yes, we added that already. Thank you. I should have noted that in my overview.
Yeah, good catch, Bram, on all of those. Okay, 3 changes from Bram that seem to make a ton of sense, reflecting our previous agreements. Sue, go ahead.
My comment is more in the spirit of Leslie Ann's, a flag of something that I think we maybe want to flag for future discussion. I believe the statute uses the word preparedness. And I believe our work, especially the Rural Resilience team, has done tremendous work around resilience. But I think we give the topic of preparedness a little bit short shrift. And I was going to talk to Director Borneman about this, but since we have a moment, I would like us in our implementation to give more discussion and time to what it takes to help communities be and individuals be more prepared. And it's different and distinct from the resilience strategies, I think. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. Appreciate that. Other reflections, having had that time to go through the document, things that don't capture our previous agreements or these kinds of comments like Sue and Leslie Ann are offering about flags for the future. Anything else? Okay. Okay. So it sounds like we have our punch list of changes, and I bet Marion and Jane are sort of frantically making those. There were sort of 4 more from the ones that she mentioned. This is what I'd like to do. And I'd like to do 2 things at the same time. One is to give Jane and Marion time to make those final versions and then post up a final PDF over which we will make our final vote. While they are doing that, this is an opportunity for us to flag the areas, this very subject matter specific areas where we're feeling very compelled to make a dissent. And I think it's helpful for us to flag those here today, so we can help if there's more than one counselor in an area, we can help facilitate, and if you want, help facilitate a shared paragraph from you on that. This is, and I have a sort of strategy to do that, and it involves going into our voting sheet that we've been using for the last 2 meetings. If you don't have it, it's up in your inbox from Jane, one of the most recent emails from Jane, and I'd invite you to open that up. We've been using those tabs at the bottom. I'll share my screen so you can see it for a second if you have any questions. These tabs at the bottom of the spreadsheet, we've been working our way through them, and I've added another one that says final plan. So scroll towards the right on those tabs and you'll get into this one that says final plan. And I don't want you to vote. We're not voting on the cap right now, so ignore column B. But I provided this space in column D for you to write if you're feeling very compelled to say, yep, I'm planning on doing a paragraph on this specific issue, right? Because we had a couple votes that we did on Monday and last Tuesday. And if the way that decision was made, you felt like you have a strong dissenting opinion, this is an opportunity for you to name that. Okay, so what I'd love you to do is name the specific issue, if there is one, or issues in which you expect to write a paragraph because you think the way it got expressed in this plan, you have a strong disagreement with. So I'm not going to keep sharing my screen for a second. You all can just keep doing that if you want to. We need to give Jane and Marion just a little bit of time here to get that final PDF up, over which we're going to spend a moment and do our final approval on. June, go ahead, please.
So this is an honest question. It's not coming from any particular viewpoint. David, I may have missed it, but can you explain to me what the need is for people to identify specifically what they intend to dissent from today if they have such an intent?
The interest here is twofold. One, it's entirely on you if you'd like to express it now, right? So that's a issue whether you feel like you want to tell your fellow counselors today, hey, I'm going to do this. The other is for us and for others to see if there's shared issues where more than one of you would do it, and that way you can coordinate on it.
Okay.
There isn't another need or requirement. So it's that combination of whether you want to let folks know now.
Yeah.
And also if you want to coordinate with others on it, this is the way to do that.
So that makes sense to me. I wouldn't want anybody to feel foreclosed from, how to put this. I understand now the idea that this is a way for people to get together if they have commonality around a particular issue that they want to dissent on. I'm thinking of the individual who may not have fully taken in the totality of the plan yet and is continuing to reflect and so on, and has a sense of wanting to dissent from this, that, or the other, but doesn't necessarily know with precision. And I only raise this because, not to go into my own psychodrama, but in law school, it often happened to me that the essence of what I learned in a given semester didn't fully gel for me until weeks later. And I'm not suggesting people have weeks here. I'm just saying that there are people who assimilate things and express their thoughts better after they've had a period of reflection. And we really have not had a lot of time to reflect on this document in the totality. I just want to be clear with my fellow council members. I am not laying the groundwork for my own action here. I'm sincerely trying to ensure the health and well-being of our collective decision-making process. That's all.
Thanks, June. And I absolutely agree with that point, June. There's nothing here is saying you can't within the deadline that we're going to set. And I'd say we just said it's going to be about a week. We'll set a date next week for folks to get this over to Jane. And I want to be responsive to Secretary Flynn's comment in the chat as well. What we're doing here is a pathway that on very specific issues, folks can say, on this issue, I have a very strong and different view. And it allows you in the moment of voting, to say yes, even though you have on this specific issue a dissent that you want to make sure folks are aware of. So we're not voting here, I would say, Secretary Flynn. What we're trying to do, in my mind, is just give people this opportunity to express a very strong different viewpoint on a particular issue. And we have that in an appendix in the document. And we will then make a formal vote to say this initial cap, I can support it or I can't support it. And that's what we'll do in just a few moments. Okay.
Hey, so David, does that page exist? Oh, there it is. I just popped up. Never mind. Sorry.
We got it. Okay. And it's also, I wanted to orient you to that page because we'll be using this spreadsheet to do that voting, and we'll try to do what was suggested earlier today, and you all agree was probably the best pathway, which we'll kind of do it simultaneously. We'll do sort of like a 1, 2, 3, hit return, and then we'll see what we got. So it's not quite as before we had spent like a minute or so on each 1 or 2 minutes while people figured out what they wanted to say. This time we're going to do a little more simultaneously. Okay. So we just have a moment here while Jane and Marion finish. And I think it's good practice to wait until we have a final document before we do a final expression of this. Secretary Tebbetts, go ahead, please.
Thank you, David, and thank you for your leadership and your team and everyone on the staff. And I just want to take a moment to really thank all my colleagues putting their heart and soul into this. And I also just want to call out some members of our ag and the Agency of Ag team who, if the public's not aware, they hundreds and hundreds of hours that state employees, and also I want to thank the countless volunteers who put in hours and hours and hours into this effort. I want to thank Ryan Patch and Diane Baufeld, Abby Willard, Justin Peck, and Alex DePillis on our side of the Agency of Ag. And I know in every other agency within state government, there's been tremendous work being done, long hours. And I want to just remind everyone, whatever vote occurs today, the work has been done and there's much more work to be done, but everyone put their heart and soul into this effort under extreme pressure. And I just want to acknowledge that a lot of people who we don't see every day on this screen have been working behind the scenes, getting us information, documents, research, working on collaboration. And I just want to thank all of them and all the state employees and also all of my fellow counselors that I've got to know some new people over the last few months, and I appreciate that. So thank you all. That's all I've really got to say, but appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Absolutely. And I see other thanks coming in the chat. I see Chris Campany tallying up some hours, which is shocking. And so each of you have, you and your colleagues have made incredible efforts to get us here. Okay, anything else folks want to say before we do this final vote on the entire cap? Anything else to say before we do this? Okay. Jane, how are we doing on a final document?
We need like 10 minutes.
Need 10 minutes. Okay. Folks, counselors, do you want to take a 10-minute break, or are you feeling confident enough about what that document's going to say that we can just go ahead and do this vote? Does anybody have a strong opinion on that? Liz?
I thought your first instinct of waiting for a complete document was the right one. So 10 minutes feels like a small additional to the 334 hours or whatever it was to make sure that happens.
Yeah, let's do it, folks. All right. And you know what? Let's make it 15. That way, if whatever happens in the great world of PDF creation, it doesn't work out. So 11:25, we'll be back and we'll come, we'll do a fast pass on the on that PDF. You guys can jump in exactly the sections you want to jump in, look at it, and then we'll be able to take this vote. All right. So we'll see you back here at 11:25. Thanks, everybody. We'll be right back. Great.
David, would you mind just taking Chris Cochran's name right out next to mine? I know he did earlier voting, but I ultimately want to be sure that folks recognize that this final vote is my vote.
You got it.
Thank you.
Done. Abby, I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
Rural Vermont, baby.
Yeah.
Get those ARPA dollars going,
Get those
huh?
ARPA dollars
Broadband?
going. Come on.
Now USDA dollars too, which is awesome.
Yeah. And infrastructure dollars. There's real dollars out there for broadband. Okay. Does anybody need more time? And I'll ask Abby, are you okay if you don't see it? Are you feeling comfortable? Okay, great. Does anybody need more time in doing a quick scroll throughout this document? Okay. All right. So this morning when we talked about how to take this vote, which is a pretty important vote, this is for the entire enchilada here, right? It's the whole initial cap. We talked about doing it a slightly different way where we would sort of do a 1, 2, 3, go kind of situation so that everybody can see at the same time what the results are. And I'm happy to share my screen for those who aren't counselors with this link. So here's our document, right? So excuse me, our Google Sheet. And before we do this, I want to do one last check for all counselors present here. Is anybody having a trouble getting to this tab on this voting sheet? Does anybody need one more helping hand on that? Because I'd love to make sure that everybody's here and not feeling embarrassed by the fact that this sheet's hard to manipulate, because Google can be squirrely. Anyone not able to be on this sheet right now?
So David, I just have a question. You're showing that for the moment, but you're not going to show it after. The reason I'm asking is because I minimize my screen to try to see the sheet, but everything is parked to the left, so I can't see the list of names the way you've got this displayed, so I'm not sure what column. So
can you see your name on the sheet?
No, I can't. This is probably me and Zoom, but
if I stop sharing, can you see your name?
Try that. Hang on just a second. No, it's got the Zoom meeting minimized. There we go. Got it. Thank you very much.
Now you got it?
I think I'm good.
Can I just try sharing again, and now that you have it, and see if this messes you back up? Let me just see if this messes you back up. Just 1 second. If it does, I'll stop it. Does that give you the same problem you're having, Joe?
No, that's better. It's in a different part of the screen now. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Apologies for the annoyance of all these technologies. Okay. So this is what I'm going to say folks do. It shows up for everybody else to see after you've hit the return button. So you can put a Y in there, an N in there, but unless you hit return, nobody can see it. So what I'm going to ask folks, unless someone wants to shout out for more time, I think we have some time. Hang on. Is everybody put in what you want to put in, and don't hit return until I count off 1, 2, 3. All right. So is everybody ready? So go ahead and put what you're going to put in there, and don't hit return until I do this. I'm going to count down, and on 3, let's hit return, everybody. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Please hit return. Okay. I think we got everybody. Okay. So we've got 19 yeses and 4 noes. So that's a strong, overwhelming majority. And thanks everybody for doing that. I really appreciate people taking the time and getting to this moment. You have approved your initial cap. Like most things in life, there's a little bit of bittersweet in it. And how this moment has happened in the process to get here. But there should be an enormous amount of pride in getting to this moment and approving a document of this caliber, with all the caveats and all the frustrations involved in it. Okay, great. Anything else to say right now before we go to public comment? We actually had on the agenda going to next steps, sorry, before we do public comment, so we could do those first. Rich, go ahead, please.
Well, maybe we should do next steps first, but I just raised my hand in order to thank you for your facilitation. It has made a huge difference. And also to thank all of the subcommittee members and staff members who have supported us all the way through. It's just been an enormous effort, and so many people deserve thanks and praise for their contributions.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you so much. So I wonder, Jane, if you want to just say a word about what comes next, what counselors can expect in the coming weeks and months.
Sure. So I also want to speak about the immediate next step of the press release and the summary of the climate action plan. But more broadly, I do appreciate what we were able to lift up today, which is really amazing. So thank you. As for what's next, we have 2 council meetings scheduled for December. We've already spoken about one significant effort of working with all of you to develop the land acknowledgement. Marion and I will also be working to final proofread, start to move forward with respect to thinking about how we market and advance the plan over the course of the next few months. There is large components of work to be done around public engagement and framing that work. We will start to speak to that in more detail with the Just Transition Subcommittee next week or the week after, I believe, as well as bringing it back to the council in the coming weeks. And then, of course, the immediate priority for the council is around ARPA funding, which is how the impetus for scheduling the meetings that we have scheduled for December, and we'll be working with cross-sector to think about how we bring forward the components of their work ready and related to ARPA dollars, as well as training for the council on the respective requirements of ARPA dollars and what qualifies and doesn't for the funding that we have allocated to us. So I'll pause there with the broad brush work of the council in the coming weeks, and then did want to draw your attention to a press release that we intend to send out after this meeting, as well as a summary of the climate action plan that was developed through our consultants, and that is posted online, and I dropped the link in the chat too as well.
Great. Super. Thanks, Jane. So there is a link in the chat to, I just want to make sure we're clicking on the right links there. There's a link in the chat to a summary document and a separate link to a press release. And so you can see both of those.
I have not put the press release in, recognizing I was going to share it on my screen. That press release was developed first by Climate Access and RISE and edited heavily by our Director of Communications. And then I was fortunate enough to have the steering committee of the council review it, critique, provide comments, and we have as well as Sue Mittner, who was gracious enough to allow us to quote her in the press release related to the Just Transitions work. So I'm happy to share that on screen so folks can read it before it goes out, but my intent was not to open that up for editing, but I did just want to be open and transparent about the press release that will come out momentarily.
Great. Okay.
And I should say, sorry, the link that I did put in the chat is a roughly 4-page, I believe, summary of the overall cap that will also be sent out with the press release and available for you all to use in communication materials as well.
Excellent. Okay. So that's immediate next steps, today's next steps, and then what to expect in the coming weeks as we have these conversations around funding. Okay. Any questions, comments around these next steps? Okay. Leslie Ann, please.
I was just thinking, David, thank you for that, that as we sort of mark this moment and start to think about the steps ahead, if maybe we could carve out a little bit of time next week to maybe reflect on lessons learned, on things that really worked well and things that worked a little less well, as we kind of move forward from here, might be good.
Thanks, Leslie Ann. That sounds like a great idea. Okay. Any other comments before we do some public comment? Okay, great. All right, so this is a chance, and I'll just note there's some really nice words of thanks going on in the chat. So that is really lovely to see. Thanks everyone for those nice words. Let's do some public comment. I know folks have been observing our meeting today. And so if there are members of the public who would like to make a comment now, this is a great time to do it. You can do that by raising your hand in the chat functions, in the chat function on the reactions tab, or you can do it by just using the actual chat, and if you want to make your comment there. So I invite members of the public, if you want to raise your hand, if you'd like to make a verbal comment, or use the chat as well as an option. If anybody's having a hard time with the mechanics of raising your hand, you can also unmute yourself and just make a comment. Okay. Great. And thanks. I see a comment in the chat. Wonderful. Okay. So folks, we're at the end of our meeting today. You have hit an enormous milestone. We've got so much work ahead too. This is a last chance if anyone wants to do any last comment before we adjourn for today and meet up in a week or so. Any last thoughts before we finish our work today? Abby? Yep, I see some hands come up. Abby, go ahead.
I mean, there are so many things I could say, but I guess most relevantly to me, I do need to say, I see the thanks to uncompensated volunteers, to people from impacted and frontline communities. I'm sorry. This has taken an enormous toll on me, on my farm, on my family, to be a part of this process. And I'm not fully comfortable voting yes for this plan, but I'm doing that because I believe in the heart, the soul, and the work and the effort that was put forward by those people who have shown up day after day to try to make this happen. And that's why I'm voting yes, is for that heart, that soul, that integrity, that commitment that I've seen, not because I necessarily think that we have succeeded here. And I do hope that we will spend some significant time after this in ways that do not continue to take so much from people to address what was missing in this process and the toll that it took on a lot of people to be at this table who typically cannot be. And I need that to be said. I need for this to be different moving forward. I need the time commitment to look different. If I'm going to be at this table, which I do think is important for people like myself, if not me specifically, but somebody like me needs to be here. That is not possible given in the framework that this has been done under. And I need that to be heard, and I need that to be changed. Because I think it is exactly the people like me that need to be here, and they're not here because that is not feasible unless you have a massive amount of privilege, of which I do. And we have to shift that. This is our future moving forward. This is so important. And we have to change how we bring people into a process like this. It has to be different moving forward if we're going to have a successful collective future here. And I do really appreciate and want to thank everybody for their time and effort and commitment in this regard. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you, Abby. Thank you so much. June, please go ahead.
So I was going to say something different, but I will preface what I was going to say by extending to you, Abby, my solemn commitment to doing what's in my power to make it different. When I hear the agony in your voice, I know it's not just your agony. And that is the nature of representative government, which is what we're engaged in here. And having spent the overwhelming majority of my life not represented and foreclosed, if not criminalized, for the very essence of who I am, I think I have a pretty good understanding of why you feel so strongly that our process needs to change. I wanted in turn to say to my colleagues here, in addition to all the curious things you've been able to observe about me in this process, it's important for me to convey to you that I have a deeply spiritual life. And part of that life demands of me that I examine my conduct at all times and that I ask forgiveness where I need to ask forgiveness so that I can be sure that you have seen me in a moment of humility, because I'm always aware that I'm imperfect and that I don't always hit my mark. And of our council members, I have been given at times to strong and forceful public expression. Many of you may even wonder how I have been able to make a career as a lawyer, as somebody entrusted with discretionary exercise of power and judgment. And I'd just like to say to you that I am at the zenith of my career right now, and there's a very troubling moment in our nation where I feel we've come to a crisis on so many levels because we do not speak clearly enough and candidly enough to each other. And so I ask your forgiveness if I have fallen short in my efforts to do so, but I have spoken plainly with all of you at times because I am making the best effort I can make to change the trajectory and the tone of our public discourse so that it can be a better and more just world that we live in and that many of you pass on to your children. Thank you for indulging me in these comments.
Thanks, June. Thanks so much. Sue, please go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to offer first with deference to the folks who were not able to vote for this plan. I do want to thank those of you who were able to vote for it, especially knowing that for many of you, there were parts of this, both the content and especially the process, that were not to your aspiration. And I know for some it took a lot to decide to vote for this, and I wanted to appreciate that. And to especially Abby, your comments obviously so powerful, that we work hard to think and act in a different way moving forward. And that's going to take a lot of creativity. And I think we all know this is a beginning. And frankly, it's a substantial beginning. Part of what worries me is how aspirational this plan is. Part of what worries me is the cost to already energy and income burdened Vermonters that this transition will incur. But if we don't set aspirational goals and trajectories, we won't get there, and we need to keep moving and we need to get started. And this is a start, and I am grateful to everyone for being a part of this. And of course, the many people not in this little Zoom moment together, but especially to all of you, thank you for your time, energy, and passion. And I know we'll be learning more of each other, maybe even in person someday. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks so much. Jared, please go ahead.
Thanks, David. I'm planning to share, as I think many other folks are, more thoughts in a signing statement, but I do want to take this opportunity to say a couple of things very briefly. You know, I was appointed to the council to primarily focus on energy and data analysis. And, you know, as co-chair of the Science and Data Subcommittee, have spent a lot of time with my head in spreadsheets and doing a lot of that analysis alongside many of you. And I feel confident that if the recommendations of the Climate Council, as outlined in this plan, are followed, not only do I think we can meet our legal requirements to reduce climate pollution, I am also confident that we can strengthen the Vermont economy while saving Vermonters money and helping to equitably transition away from dependence on imported high cost and price volatile fossil fuels. Most of my work on this council has been about energy emissions economics analysis. But at the end of the day, and I just want to end this on a personal note, it's also most importantly about ethics. And most of all, my vote for this plan, and I believe that many others, is because it represents Vermont's first serious attempt to act at the scale and pace necessary to do our part, not only in meeting the science-based imperative of reducing climate pollution, but also the moral imperative to our fellow Vermonters and all of humanity to transition beyond fossil fuel use and help reduce both the direct and indirect costs of our energy use. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Absolutely. Chris, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to share that, I hope it's not the worst thing to have a plan out there for the public to respond to, and for us to then be responsive to the public based on the feedback that we get. And one of the things I would challenge us to do is to really make a genuine approach to future iterations and updates that that really begins with the just transitions principles and builds from those, and to really engage with the frontline communities in a truly deep and meaningful way, to where they help, where they're key to developing, policies, action strategies going forwards, as opposed to, frankly, a lot of us on this council who, kind of live in the policy realm. And I'm just reflecting back on, in my past, my work with farmers in sustainable agriculture, and before that, fishermen on sustainable fishing practices. And I can tell you that some of the worst policy decisions I ever saw came out of policy wonks, and some of the best policies I ever saw came from the farmers themselves, the fishermen themselves. And I think really to make this work, we're going to have to really get out with the people where they are and develop policies and actions that really do spring up from the grassroots. I think too much of this probably does come from places of, not with any ill meaning, but just without lack of real engagement of the people who are going to have to be dealing with this stuff in the day-to-day lives. That being said, I think it's also really important for the public to understand, especially as was demonstrated by, Abby's humanity here, that everybody in this council is human, and we're all going to have to be living by these policies and our actions, and frankly, inaction too. So I know there's a lot of stuff in the press about, this council being unaccountable, and not responsible to anybody, but like we're somehow operating in some kind of vacuum, and that's not the case. So I hope folk recognize this, your fellow Vermonters who are trying to do the best we can, developing plans, and we're going to do a better job going forward with really engaging with the public.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks so much. Catherine, please go ahead.
I just wanted to note that I appreciate, Julie, you sharing the administration's statement that's going out today. And I just wanted to say that that makes me sad. And I just wanted to express my sadness that such a negative statement is going out at the same time as the plan is being released. I know it's totally within the right of the administration to do that. I just want to express that me personally, as a person, which Chris just noted, we all are, and Abby said so eloquently, it makes me sad. That being said, I am looking forward to working with everybody on the council and members of the public hopefully more of them as we move forward to really refine these actions and take on our next steps. And just want to express my appreciation for the congeniality we've all been able to show to each other, even when we disagree.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay. Okay. All right. So we have work ahead. We had a big milestone today, more to do. It's really important to have these reflections. It's kind of super unsatisfying to have them here on a computer screen as opposed to in person. But I really appreciate people willing to go there and have these really more personal human type reflections today. All right, folks, our work is done today. Our work continues next week. Jane will send around an email specifically setting a deadline to get any signing statements or these specific points of dissent into Jane and Marion, so that can be compiled into the appendices we've been talking about today. Expect that, and expect that'll be a deadline sometime next week. All right. And I'm seeing Lauren's in the chat trying to get in as well. She's having a hard time being verbal today. And so I'll just invite everyone to see those comments from Lauren in the chat. Okay, and others. Great, folks. Thank you all so much. We did it today. We will see you soon. Have a great rest of your day and deep breath. We made it to this milestone and we will continue the work. Take care, everybody. I invite you to all come off mute and say hi to each other and bye to each other. But take care.
Bye,
And,
everyone.
have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
So much.
Bye.
Bye and thanks.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Take care, everybody.